Welcome back to Robots versus Vampires. Where the impossible becomes reality and robots and vampires collide in the most unexpected ways. I'm Adrian Smith.
And I'm Julia Jones, ready to untangle fact from fiction, dissecting the tech and the supernatural.
Today we're taking you behind the scenes of our show using the story When Darkness Falls as our guide.
It's a story about teenagers, a meteor shower, and a prophecy that pits them against a world of vampires.
The perfect case study for exploring the robots versus vampires concept.
Exactly. So let's start with the robots versus vampires show guide. What stands out to you as we think about this story?
Well, the guide emphasizes the importance of strong visuals even in an audio medium, and When Darkness Falls definitely delivers on that front.
All right, think about that opening scene, the woods at night, glowing with an eerie luminescence after the meteor shower. It's the kind of image that instantly captures your imagination.
Totally. You can practically feel the tension, that blend of awe and fear, as these teenagers, Benji, Sarah, and Maya, realize something extraordinary is happening.
It's a great example of how a strong opening hook can draw listeners in. The guide also talks about strategic cliffhangers, and When Darkness Falls uses those effectively, too.
Absolutely. Like when the vampires first emerge from the glowing woods, their gaunt figures, burning eyes.
Yeah.
It's a chilling contrast to the teens' youthful energy.
And that moment where Maya mentions the prophecy, the sense that they're destined to fight the night, it's a perfect cliffhanger that leaves you wanting more.
The guide really stresses the importance of exaggerated character voices, and this story gives us some great examples of that.
Oh, for sure. Benji's quippy one-liners delivered with a mix of bravado and terror, classic teenager facing the impossible.
And Sarah's pragmatism, her almost cheerful embrace of their powers. Who wants normal? We can glow in the dark, guys.
Those distinct voices not only bring the characters to life, but they also inject humor into a potentially terrifying situation.
Which is a hallmark of robots versus vampires, right?
Yeah.
Finding the comedy in the unexpected even when it involves vampires.
Absolutely. The guide talks about balancing those intense moments with lighter, more comedic beats, and When Darkness Falls strikes that balance beautifully.
As we're talking about this, I'm realizing how much the storytelling guide also applies to this story.
What do you mean?
Well, the guide talks about creating vivid scenes that transport the listener, and When Darkness Falls excels at that. The description of the fight scene, luminescence versus shadows, modern teens against ancient creatures, it's epic.
It also highlights the importance of highlighting character reactions, making them relatable even when facing impossible odds. Think about Benji's yearning for normalcy despite his newfound powers. I think we've all felt that way at times.
Totally. We all have those moments where we just want things to be simple, even when we're capable of extraordinary things. And the guide reminds us to end each episode with a satisfying conclusion, a moment that leaves the listener feeling both fulfilled and eager for more.
And When Darkness Falls definitely delivers on that. The image of the teens racing towards a glowing tree, their laughter echoing through the woods, it's hopeful, it's inspiring, and it makes you wonder what adventures await them.
It's the perfect blend of action, humor, and heart, all the elements that make a robots versus vampires story so compelling.
It's a great reminder that even amidst the chaos of robots and vampires, there's always room for laughter, for connection, for a little bit of hope.
And that's something we strive for in every episode of Robots versus Vampires, isn't it?
Absolutely. We want to entertain, but we also want to connect with our listeners to create a shared experience.
Speaking of connecting with our listeners, I think it's time for us to bring you into the conversation. We've talked a lot about the show guides and how they apply to When Darkness Falls, but what are your thoughts? What resonates with you most about this story? What elements of the robots versus vampires concept do you find most compelling?
We'd love to hear your perspective.
But for now, we're going to take a quick break. Make sure you come back for part 2, where we'll continue to unpack the robots versus vampires concept and explore the deeper themes and symbolism within When Darkness Falls.
We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of the impossible and the extraordinary. Until then, keep those imaginations firing. Welcome back to Robots vs. Vampires, where we dissect the impossible and explore the boundaries of imagination.
I'm Adrian Smith, and I'm excited to continue our deep dive into the robots versus vampires concept using the story When Darkness Falls as our guide.
And I'm Julia Jones, ready to uncover the hidden layers of meaning and explore the techniques that make this show so unique.
One thing that really struck me about When Darkness Falls is how it uses humor to balance the intense, even scary elements of the story.
Absolutely. The Robots vs. Vampires show guide emphasizes the importance of humor, and the story nails it.
Right, like when the teens are freaking out about their newfound powers and Benji just blurts out, "Think we can ask for a do-over?" Being normal was kind of underrated. It's funny, but it also highlights the very real fear of the unknown that we all experience.
It's that perfect blend of humor and heart that makes robots versus vampires so engaging.
And the storytelling guide really emphasizes that balance between humor and suspense action and reflection. It encourages us to create a dynamic listening experience.
Which brings us to another key element of the robots versus vampires concept: pacing. The guide talks about keeping the story moving, balancing those intense moments with lighter, more comedic beats.
And When Darkness Falls does a great job of that. We have those heart-stopping moments like the vampire attack, but then we have those quieter, more reflective scenes where the teens are processing what's happening, maybe even grabbing a milkshake to cope.
It's like a roller coaster ride with those thrilling highs and those moments of calm that allow you to catch your breath.
Exactly. And that dynamic pacing is so important for keeping listeners engaged, making them feel like they're part of the adventure.
The guide also stresses the importance of visual storytelling even in an audio medium. And When Darkness Falls is full of vivid imagery.
Like that description of the fight scene, luminescence versus shadows, modern teens against ancient creatures.
It's almost cinematic the way the story uses language to paint a picture in your mind.
And the guide encourages us to use those vivid descriptions to transport the listener to the heart of the story,
Yeah.
making them feel like they're right there alongside the characters.
Another interesting point from the guide is the idea of breaking the fourth wall, connecting with the listeners directly.
Right. Those moments where we acknowledge that this is a podcast, that we're sharing this experience with you, it creates a sense of intimacy and humor.
It's like we're all in on the joke together, enjoying the absurdity of it all.
Speaking of absurdity, the Robots versus Vampires show guide really encourages us to embrace the unexpected, to push the boundaries of imagination.
And that's what makes this show so unique, isn't it? The blending of seemingly disparate worlds, robots, and vampires to create something fresh and exciting.
It's a reminder that anything is possible, that even the most unlikely pairings can lead to incredible stories.
And that's what we strive for in every episode of Robots versus Vampires. To surprise and delight our listeners, to make them laugh, think, and maybe even see the world a little differently.
Now, before we move on, I want to touch on one more key element from the storytelling guide: character development. The guide reminds us to make our characters relatable, even when they possess extraordinary powers or face impossible odds.
And When Darkness Falls excels at that. We see Benji's fear, Sarah's pragmatism, Maya's growing sense of responsibility. They're not just superheroes, they're teenagers trying to figure out their place in the world.
And that's something we can all relate to, that sense of searching for our purpose, our destiny, even when it feels like the universe is throwing curveballs our way.
Exactly. And that's what makes these stories so compelling. They're not just about robots and vampires. They're about the human experience amplified through a fantastical lens.
So as we continue our exploration of robots versus vampires, I want to pose a question to you. What do you think is the most important element of a compelling story? Is it the plot, the characters, the themes, or something else? Entirely share your thoughts with us because we'd love to hear from you.
But for now, we're going to take a quick pause to gather our thoughts and prepare for the final part of our deep dive into When Darkness Falls and the robots versus vampires concept. Join us soon as we wrap up this thrilling discussion,
Welcome back to Robots versus Vampires.
where we explore the thrilling intersection of technology and the supernatural.
I'm Adrian Smith, and we are wrapping up this episode where we've been taking a look at the story When Darkness Falls as a way to explore what makes our show Robots versus Vampires so unique.
I'm Julia Jones, and it's been fascinating to see how the Robots versus Vampires show guide and the storytelling guide come to life in this particular story.
You know, one of the things the Robots versus Vampire show guide really emphasizes is the importance of clear storytelling, even when dealing with complex concepts like robots and vampires.
Absolutely. It reminds us that the story needs to be accessible and engaging for all listeners, regardless of their familiarity with sci-fi or fantasy.
Right. When Darkness Falls does a great job of that. The language is vivid and descriptive, but it never gets bogged down in technical jargon or overly complicated mythology.
Exactly. We're dropped right into the action with these relatable teenagers, and the story unfolds in a way that's both exciting and easy to follow.
The guide also highlights the importance of strong visuals, and When Darkness Falls certainly delivers on that front.
Definitely think about the description of the vampires emerging from the glowing woods, their eyes burning like embers. It's such a striking image that immediately sets the tone for the story.
And remember the scene where the teens discover their powers? Benji zipping around at super speed, Sarah conjuring shimmering barriers, Maya leaving trails of light wherever she touches. It's like a superhero movie playing out in your mind.
Those vivid descriptions are key to creating an immersive listening experience even without any actual visuals.
And speaking of creating an experience, the Robots vs. Vampires show guide encourages us to break the fourth wall from time to time to directly engage with you, our listeners.
Those little winks to the audience, those moments of shared humor and self-awareness, are part of what makes this show so special.
It's about creating a sense of community, a feeling that we're all in on the joke together, exploring these wild ideas side by side.
Exactly, and that sense of shared discovery is something we strive for in every episode of Robots vs. Vampires.
Now, I want to touch on one more point from this storytelling guide that I think is crucial to making any story truly memorable: character development.
The guide reminds us that even in a world of robots and vampires, it's the characters that truly resonate with listeners.
And When Darkness Falls gives us some really great examples of that. We see Benji's initial reluctance to embrace his powers, Sarah's almost eagerness to dive into the unknown, Maya's quiet determination to fulfill her destiny.
These aren't just one-dimensional characters. They're complex individuals with their own fears, motivations, and desires.
And their journey, their transformation over the course of the story is something we can all connect with on a personal level.
It reminds us that even when faced with extraordinary circumstances, it's our humanity, our ability to grow and change that ultimately defines us.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into When Darkness Falls and the guiding principles behind Robots versus Vampires, what are your final takeaways?
I think it's a testament to the power of imagination, of blending seemingly disparate worlds to create something truly unique and engaging.
And it's a reminder that even in a world dominated by technology and logic, there's still room for magic, for wonder, for those unexpected moments that make life worth living.
So if you enjoyed this episode of Robots vs. Vampires, be sure to rate and follow the show for more epic tales of robots, vampires, and everything in between.
And until next time, keep those imaginations firing. Because in the world of Robots versus Vampires, the extraordinary is just a story away.